going on, everybody? This is James Grandmaster Facts Voice, and this is another episode of the Facts Project. Today, special guest, somebody I wanted to have on here on this pod for a very long time, the creator of It's Nana the Were-Spider, Greg Anderson Elysee. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Absolutely, man. Look, you have been one of the creators that when I first started to take this deep dive into indie comics, you had an established series with a lot of continuity that a lot of people had pretty much put on, not necessarily like put on a pedestal, but when names get brought up, you're one of them. So I find that, of course, is an accomplishment, and has always been my outreach to, of course, talk to those creators one-on-one. And you have always been on that list, and I'm just glad that I finally got a hold of you.
I appreciate that, man. That means a lot. Thank you.
No doubt. So It's Nana the Were-Spider. Well, from the beginning of how you've talked about it with Forgotten Stories, The Hornet's Web, Showtime, and the newly released Birthday Day. Like, how has this been constructed for you in establishing this tale? And the fact that you continue to talk about this character on and on throughout this series, how has that been just like basically molding and transforming the story of It's Nana?
Well, it's been a lot of fun, for one, first and foremost. And originally, I wanted It's Nana to represent the next generation of reclaiming our roots and our stories, essentially, given that he's supposed to be the son of Anansi the spider. And as I was creating this character, originally he was actually supposed to be an adult. It was supposed to be a very mature type of book.
Mm-hmm.
But when I started releasing like the general idea and pictures, a lot of people were like, "Oh, I can't wait to share this with my kid." And I was like, "Oh snap, that's a thing I didn't really think about, you know." And so as time went on, it's like he got younger and younger, and now he's sort of like a teenager. And essentially that also opens up a lot of development that I can do with the character. So as the character is moving through different realms and meeting different Black figures, he's also growing and learning as an individual, trying to find out who he is in life and his purpose in life, while also having to, at the same time, try to please his father.
Mm-hmm.
You know, given that his father is Anansi the spider, you know, and he's never really had a relationship with him. And so I try to see every new tale, every new story as a different avenue of exploring not only African lore and mythologies and stories, but also just his own individuality. And so I just have a lot of fun with trying to find those connections.
Yeah, and for a lot of people that do not know, Anansi, of course, is the trickster god based out of West African Ghana, and more specific folklore, and even more so in the Caribbean. Now, you are of Haitian descent, so you have had familiarity with Anansi before. Has this always been something that you wanted to tell?
So Anansi is actually not that well known in Haitian Caribbean folklore and mythology. It's definitely like you'll find the stories in Jamaica and Trinidad and other Caribbean countries, but Haiti, we have our own particular stories. Because I remember I would ask my mom about Anansi the spider, and she's like, "I don't know what that is," you know. And so I had to sort of tell her a little bit of Anansi stories. But I grew up mostly on like Greek mythology.
Yeah.
You know, I was obsessed with Hercules and Xena back then. And because of that opened up my interest of learning about other Greek mythology. And I would get all the books. I would go in the library and I would just consume and absorb as much knowledge as I can on Greek mythology. And one day I was in high school, and my art teacher had a book on mythologies from all over the world. Of course, the first thing I went to was Greek.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was just interested in the book in general. And then I was like, yo, what other gods are out there? And I saw that, you know, we had Haitian gods and deities that I knew nothing about. And then when I went through that book, I was like, yo, we have our own gods? That was just a world mind-opening mindfuck for me, you know. And so when I would ask my mom, unfortunately, my mom was like, I don't want to talk about that because you know, we have all that negative connotation of a lot of our cultural roots to many of us, it's rooted in evil, and we know why, colonialism. And so
Yep.
I would ask my pops, and my pops was like, "Oh, what you want to know? I know some stories," And so that was what sort of started my interest in learning about more Black folklore figures and traditional story figures and so on and so forth. And so as time went on, I got to college. When I started taking electives, I started finding, some African or Black studies, and some of that was, African American folklore stories and how that coming from African stories, and that's where my love for those classes, it became my love for wanting to make these type of stories and hopefully educate people and, or more so introduce people to a lot of these concepts and these figures that we have.
Mm. Now, I can tell you the familiarity with that because my grandparents being from Barbados, they had a folklore tale of the Bakuman, which was pretty much like a short man, like a pygmy character, almost like a leprechaun, based in Caribbean and African folklore that granted wishes to most of the rich and wealthy people of the island, but yet you had to go to a particular sector of the forest in order to catch it. But it was mischievous and devious, and you had to feed it all the time and everything like that. It was some creepy shit. Now, one thing I can say about Caribbean folks, they don't really do spooky shit that well. They don't like to talk about it. You know what I'm saying? Because they're superstitious and they don't want to, they don't want to bring that bad mojo within the household. So I can totally understand that. But continuing with Anansi, being a trickster god, the one thing about the beginning of this tale with his Nana is the trick is being played on him because he is almost a hostage in the human world.
Mm.
Why is that? Like it's like a he didn't intend to be here, but for the most part he's getting a little bit more comfortable as these stories are being told.
I can't wait for you to how you think about that within the next couple of stories.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, it's definitely a fish out of water story.
Mm-hmm.
I established that he comes from a different realm, and he's sort of trapped in our world. So if he goes back, he ends up being stuck back in his world, but he feels very responsible for all the different horrors that he released from all these different realms, and so he feels very his duty. He feels is to let me squash all this, let me bring these villains back to where they're supposed to be, and then I can finally go home.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we don't know how many villains he's unleashed, and we're even finding out that there's actually certain horrors that he never actually unleashed himself, that he's finding himself coming into the paths with and so on. So there's a couple of that. I will say there's an upcoming story where I've hinted at this in the various past ones, but I don't know if not many people have caught it. But in one of the upcoming stories, it goes into his depression. And so it's sort of tackling, him being a teen, him being homesick, but him also not understanding that where these feelings coming from that he's getting. So there might be a lot more to the general mythos going on in his head.
Right.
And so there's going to be a lot, a lot of tackle with that. But
that's
being a hostage to this world, as you said, I never thought of it that way, but that's literally exactly what I've done.
Yeah.
You will see how much of a toll it takes on him.
Now, between like the stories, I know for Forgotten Stories and Hornet's Web are pretty much 1 and 2. Showtime fits directly in the middle of that. And then when we're talking about the newly released Birthday Day that basically just hit on Kickstarter, well, completed Kickstarter, and now it's about to hit our hands, which I'm going to get. That's the prequel to all this. So basically, you're seeing what the Mother Kingdom is, him in his arachnid form, and pretty much his tales with his other friends, where that's more of a children's story as opposed to a lot of people. What do you say to people that think that it's not as a horror comic?
I'm totally cool with that, man.
Okay.
I'm totally cool with that because I grew up on horror stories.
Mm-hmm.
I love horror. I love horror movies, books, and those creepy supernatural Caribbean stories. I love them as well. And it's just, I think I I started writing these stories in mind for it being like a bit of a dark horror thing.
Mhm.
And the thing is, with a lot of my writing, whether it's comics or any other thing that I've written, like plays, a lot of horror comes in, but a lot of different genres come in as well. And so I don't try to write in mind of this is just going to be this type of story. I
Right.
allow my mind to just go where it needs to be in order to tell the story. Sometimes a lot of comedy comes into place. Um,
True.
Sometimes some surrealism, some abstract, whatever it is. And I just go with the flow with the themes. If the theme works, if the setup works where it doesn't feel like it's come out of nowhere, then I'll just go with that. But I've had some people debate between if it's a horror book, if it's not a horror book. I like to say it is, but the ones who say it's not, I'm always like, okay, if you don't feel it is, but if it works for you, cool. It doesn't matter.
Right. So, like I know a lot of people like to proclaim it as a horror comic. I've seen people like basically, as far as reviews have been concerned, have displayed it as such. I mean, I like to give the title as like almost it's almost like a street fantasy to me. You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
I usually say like a dark fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm cool with all genres because I've definitely seen how different people have classified it under different things, especially because each story is a little bit like a different genre itself. Like Showtime, there's like little moments of horror, but it's not a horror story.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the ballads of John Henry and Rawhead. You have the Rawhead, which is definitely a horror story, but the John Henry one is sci-fi. And so I totally understand.
Yeah, because there's so many tall tales and legends out there, and the thing is, even more so, the ones that we've learned here in the States, they were more so somebody performing some type of extraordinary feat, and then it was like exaggerated in some sort of way to where it became a legend. Like
Yeah.
the story of John Henry, of course, like beating the steam mill pipe and basically like winning but dying in the end. Pecos Bill, Paul Bunyan, all those type of things. Like Paul Bunyan to me just sounds like somebody that was just extremely tall that walked around with a cow, might have had a blue hue to it.
Mhm.
That might have been it. But 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 the story got told on and on and on about this guy, and then all of a sudden the tale got just bigger and more exaggerated after its time, which is more so what a lot of people say of a lot of gods that are out there. A lot of people that are perceived or held on this high pedestal with the storylines that they're being told, and might have been actual people. Might have been actual people that they've been told for. So to you, like what is the what is the importance of folklore when it comes to comics?
Well, I feel like comics itself right now, especially even the modern superheroes from the big two, I feel like those are the new modern mythology,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel it's so many people are reading it now, so many children, and even though more so, let's just say Japanese manga is probably the biggest thing now. But even then, when with those type of stories, I love when the creators go into mythology from their own culture,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of anime, even a lot of anime, a lot of manga, like the Nine-Tailed Fox is huge in Naruto, and that's their own actual mythology.
Right.
Goku being inspired by the Monkey King, so seeing a lot of that in my opinion is sort of a way of reclaiming their roots, but also keeping their roots alive, keeping their stories, their culture alive.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a lot of folks who may not be aware of a lot of these mythologies until they love Dragon Ball Z so much, and they want to do some backstory of, hey, what inspired, and then they learn about the Monkey King.
Right.
And I think it goes back to knowledge of self and pride and cultural pride. Because one thing I feel a lot of Black folks, we're getting to the point where we want to know more about our past. We want to know more about where we come from.
Right.
We're tired of being fed bastardizations of our culture and negative. How do you say? I'm looking for the word, but I think you know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. So I think us, like a knowledge of our folklore, of our culture, I think is just a way of us reconnecting with who we are and our roots and not losing touch of that and realizing that there's more than just European stories. It's not like European culture should not be the total high class for everything. You know,
Right.
there's so much that we've come from. There's so much past. There's so much history, and I just think comics is a great way of introducing people to that, and that's what I've been trying to do with this Nana as well.
Hmm.
I don't try to hit you in the head of this is who this character is. I just try to incorporate them as these are just normal type characters, and I've had many people who tell me they didn't feel like they knew enough about them until they did research
Right.
themselves. And just like, that's literally the reason why I wrote it a particular way. I want y'all to do your own research and find out which country did this figure come from? What is the actual mythology?
Hmm.
And it's me, once again, it's modernizing. And as I said, it's not supposed to be the next generation after Anansi. It's trying to showcase that we can make really cool stories and not turn them into like some crazy bastardization like colonialism has done with, you know, voodoo or black spirituality and
It's
so
true.
on.
There's even the case where mythology has been stolen and the stories have been pretty much transplanted into European culture, or as they like to say, they borrowed them to where, there was a African god of thunder in Shango. And then we have, of course, anybody that reads Marvel comics knows who Thor is. And that mythology exists in both. They just have no knowledge of Shango at all,
Mm-hmm.
and nor of any of the tales of that. But the thing is, it does exist. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't seem to realize.
Yeah, very true. And that's also one thing that I try to be very careful of too, because there's definitely still people who worship and believe in Shango, you
Hmm.
know, and me myself, when it comes to trying to represent some of these figures, especially the ones who are still in African spirituality and traditions, I don't want to step on anyone's toes and misrepresent them.
Hmm.
And I feel like I've been offended many times watching certain shows where they totally misrepresent certain figures. And even if I don't follow them, I'm not a believer, but I'm
Right.
just like, oh, that's messed up. Why would you do that? Yeah, I feel offended. Um, Having done research and finding out who these figures are, and then seeing the way some of these European made shows just fuck up the traditions, you know.
Hmm.
So that's one of those things too. I try to be careful of.
One of the most one of the intriguing things that I've seen you have an interesting take on was how the current run, or better yet, the run of existence within X-Men and the mutants, how they've been able to take uh, African American storylines through history and transplanted them into these comics. I've heard you speak about this before, and you have a take on how this current run has gone, because it's it's the liberation of black people, uh what I'm saying, within this island of Krakoa, if you want to put it in that perspective. And then all of a sudden, it's the utopia, it's the back to Africa movement, it's the Marcus Garvey movement. It's almost telling almost the same story, but almost if it happened. And then how all this constructed around sci-fi and mutants and everything like that. Could you touch on that real quick?
Yeah, so I try to get me in trouble.
Nah, nah, nah.
I mean, like most, honestly, like most marginalized folks, people of different, of non-white races, people who aren't straight, I've noticed that they love X-Men,
Hmm.
and I love X-Men. That was definitely one of um, the first speculative fiction thing that I've been introduced to, and I've loved it ever since. But as you get older, you get a little desensitized from it, especially for me, when you start to realize, okay, the subtext, oh, okay, civil rights movement, cool, oh, that's pretty cool, um, and all this other stuff, and then you start thinking about the fact of a lot of a lot of the people who've been writing the stories, they are not people of color, um, and a lot of people who've been creating these various characters are not people of color, um, or nor are they really queer. And then you have a lot of fact that X-Men takes a lot of the plights from queer people as well, their struggles of being accepted, of trying to hide who they are, of their puberty, their feelings manifesting as a teenager. They don't know how to control it. So it's just like, yo, they've been using the plights of Black folks, of queer folks, of other folks of color, apartheid, like all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always through the lens of a white man writing these stories. You'll get a couple of white women here and there, or what's her name? Marjorie Liu, I thought was pretty cool when she did Astonishing for a little bit.
Yep.
So there's every now and then you'll get a little something, and you have Vita, who's currently writing an XMen spinoff. I forgot which one it is.
She's doing New Mutants and Children of the Atom.
Yeah, their work is, from what I've read, I really enjoy what I've read. But you can tell there's also a difference sometimes when you read someone who is of color, who know what they're talking about because they've had particular struggles, versus, someone like Hickman. And not to say anything wrong with Hickman's run. What I've read so far is like, this is really cool. The high concept is cool and stuff like that.
Right.
But there's a certain thing that happens when someone who knows what they're talking about, they've gone through these backgrounds, they know what the subtext is because they lived the subtext. Why not put us on the actual main book and see what we do? Like, imagine Christopher Priest as an X-Men writer.
That'd be amazing.
Like, imagine like that, the crap that he writes, the racial politics that he can produce and put in, and all the different characters and their backstories. Like, that dude would destroy.
I'll do you one better. What if you wrote an X-Men comic?
They ain't ready. Imagine, that'd be cool though. That'd be cool.
Would there be one singular character that you would take out of the X-Men that you would want to mold yourself?
I don't even know. Honestly, I feel like I really like the Bishop character, but there's a lot of things with Bishop that I feel is undefined with him since he's been introduced since the 90s, because there's been debates about what his race is. Sometimes we don't know if he's Black, if he's African American, if he's Aborigine.
Yeah.
You don't know who's his lineage. There's all this other stuff, and sometimes his personality shifts between who's writing him.
Yeah.
Or how his powers work sometimes. So I feel I would like to, like Christopher Priest did with Black Panther, where he like just streamlined everything. I would like to find like the streamline of, maybe he is all of that, but what exactly is it? And I feel there's a lot of potential with him as a leader. He was like a freaking police chief, essentially, time fugitive. There's a lot of things you can do with him. And I feel like even going through different timelines, different universes, and tackling racial politics and mutant politics that you can do with Bishops, and him being a Black cop as well. There's so many things you can do with that.
Yeah. The fact that he grew up in a concentration camp. He grew up in a mutant concentration camp. That was like his birth to about maybe around 12 years old.
Yeah.
Almost in the same sense that Magneto was being raised in an actual concentration camp without being a mutant. He was there because he was Jewish.
There's mad. You see, that's the thing that I've peeped too with a lot of characters of color when it comes to Marvel and DC. A lot of times you don't quite get too much nuances until you get somebody of color, somebody who does so much research on them. Even same thing with have you read Midnighter?
Yes.
By Stephen Orlando?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's always been a pretty dope character, but until they actually finally got a gay writer to write him, I think actually not gay, he's bisexual, Stephen Orlando. After he finally got a bisexual writer to write him, those stories were just ridiculous. Because it's like you finally get someone of that background who knows what they're talking about, who can really add those nuances that's been missing because they've always just created by white straight characters. Creators, not characters, creators.
Yeah, because you're mostly looking at the action of the character and the missions that he goes on, but you're not actually picking their brain. You're not seeing the inhibitions of what
Exactly.
it means to be a gay character within the DC universe and what exactly like he's going through, or those conversations that he has with Apollo. Like it's like whatever you were writing before, it don't look like that now.
Yep. Yep.
But essentially, you know, to put it plainly, I mean, for you being in the indie game for as long as you've had, and then for us to go through COVID the way that we did, and for a lot of creators to then, for the most part, market themselves online. How has that been for you?
Repeat that. I'm sorry, you cut off my.
No, I was saying as far as like as far as COVID and just like how it pretty much the pandemic had created for a lot of indie creators to pretty much go into a bubble as far as marketing wise, and then pretty much sell themselves through social media, through the internet. Like how has that been for you within the past year?
It's been tough, honestly, because a lot of my sales used to come from conventions.
Mm-hmm.
So once conventions closed, that was a lot of my money flow just stopped.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then there was sort of that fear of when the quarantine first happened. A lot of people didn't want to run the risk of doing Kickstarters because no one was making any money.
Mm.
And so there was a bit of that, but yet I think it was Roye Okupe who launched something in the beginning of COVID, and it did great because people was like, "Yo, we need that escapism,"
Mm-hmm.
and I think that also pushed some people just to try a couple of things. And another thing that helped me out, honestly, financially, unfortunately, was the whole Michael Floyd thing, George Floyd, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
George Floyd, because all of a sudden it was like, "Oh, let's support these black folks." And it was just like that's a little unfortunate that that's what needed to happen for you
Right.
guys, But so there was moments where I would make a lot of sales every now and then, and doing the Kickstarters would help as well.
Mm-hmm.
But little by little, there would be certain like stores reopening and doing little events, and I'd make a couple of change and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
it definitely sucked,
I'm sure.
financial wise, but it did help with my creativity. So I got to finally sit down and work on some stuff that I needed to work on. So it was cool.
Good, good. And now I think what was BlurredCon the first convention that you actually like got back out to do physical sales?
Was it? Wait, BlurCon was no. It was actually there's a comic shop in New York City called Anyone Comics.
Yes, I'm familiar in
They,
Brooklyn.
yeah, they did they did a free comic book day um event, which was it was only like 4 5 different creators, people vending. They did a queer con thing, they did a black con thing, and I've been in all of them, and they've been making it an ongoing joke that I'm definitely I'm always gonna be there type of thing. And then BlurCon, there was BlurCon as well, which was great. Made a lot of great new readers, supporters. It was fun.
Good. And now, when are we going to expect any development of Stronghold 2?
You got to talk to Jason Reeves about that, bro.
Oh man.
You got to talk to them because
Okay.
I've written 3 scripts already. I've written issue 1 through 3. I have a feeling I spoke to him already. I was just like, because originally it was supposed to be 4 issues, but I
Mm.
was like, I don't think we could wrap this up in 4. And so he was like, damn it, Greg, but issue 2 has been written. Issue 2 has been drawn and inked. We just need the colors and the letters.
Mhm.
But it's on its way.
Good. Good, man. Well, bro, I appreciate you doing this with me. This has been awesome. So for anybody that is not familiar with you, where can they get your comics at? So Feel free to plug yourself as much as possible through Webway Comics and everything. Is where can we see Isnana, or where can we obtain Stronghold 1?
Mm. So you can just you can type in webwaycomics.ecwid.com, or you can just type in Webway Comics on Google. It will show up, or Isnana the Were Spider. You can find me on social media, Greg DAE on IG. My page links you directly to the where you can purchase it as well, or Greg and Elysee on Twitter. You can get Stronghold at 133art.com.
Copy that. Well, brother, it was amazing to have you. Thank you. For real, I wish you the best. As far as like birthday day is pretty much going to be in my hands, probably like in the next month or so. And if when and ever I get Jason Reeves on this show, I'm gonna ask him about Stronghold 2 and the rest of his collection that's pretty much going to come out. So for all of us at the Facts Project, this is James Grandmaster Facts Boyce. Thank you to Greg Anderson Elysee. We are out.